said earlier about trade show events, right? You're not going to have a marketing person standing on the stand listening to every single word and say, no, that was wrong. That was wrong. You got to change that, because you just wouldn't do that. So why do people want to do it on social media? It's basically the same thing, just a virtual world rather than physical.
Hi, and welcome to the Social at Scale podcast. I'm Cameron Brain, your host and the CEO and co-founder of Everyone Social. This podcast is dedicated to the topic of employee advocacy and how marketing, sales, and recruiting teams use it to drive efficient ROI. Let's get going.
Hi, my name is Jake Potter. I'm head of social media at Colt Technology Services, where I've worked for the past 6.5 years.
Well, thanks for joining, Jake. We've had a chance to meet a number of times in the past at your office over the years, and you've been using Everyone Social for like a fair amount of time. Kind of given your history with the Colt employee advocacy program, why would you say it's important for Colt to be investing in employee advocacy?
I think it's really important for Colt or any business to invest in employee advocacy, because your people are like miniature influencers for your brand. I think particularly in the B2B world, there aren't loads of influencers out there with millions of followers that you might have available to you in companies that are more B2C. And so you have to use your people as those influencers. And when I look at how many people we have at Colt, which is currently 5,000 people, and if you think about how many connections they would have on average on LinkedIn, which I would estimate around at least 500 per person, that means we've got a potential audience of 2.5 million people. And Colt's footprint on LinkedIn is 300,000. So it's like a huge opportunity. And if we don't invest in tools like Everyone Social, then we are missing a massive opportunity.
Yeah. How have you seen the leadership at Colt? Has their perspective about social changed over the years? Because again, I think we've been working together for 4 years, maybe longer.
Yeah, I think it has been that long. When I first joined Colt, I was their first ever social media, paid social media employee that they ever had. So I'd say we've been on a real journey over the time that I've been there. From clearly people saw value in it because they hired a social media person, but it's really taken this time to present to lots of people around the business and the leadership teams to tell them the value. Now we're seeing our leadership teams actively head onto social media without me even needing to prompt them, and even creating their own content. I mean, I love it when I use Everyone Social to find content, but actually creating their own content as well. And it's really paying off. We're seeing our CFO, for example, he's really actively posting. He's got lots of content on LinkedIn. Our CEO, Kerry Gilder, she's now one of the LinkedIn official influencers, which I think they just renamed to Top Voices. But yeah, she's part of that group. So we are really seeing a active leadership team who are seeing the value in it.
That's cool. Yeah, which was not the case a few short years ago. Would you agree?
Correct. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. How do you think about kind of personal branding versus professional branding, employer branding? Is there even a distinction between any of that? Is that important to be thinking about as a part of a advocacy program?
Yeah, I think that's an important thing to think about. And I think the lines between all those things are starting to become a lot more blurred. I think if we think back to companies like 10 years ago or longer, they very much had their company brand that stuck to their rules. And I was actually thinking the other day about what the world before social media was like for companies, where it didn't really matter if companies were so kind of personal or kind of people-led, because they didn't have a voice. They just marketed their products, people bought it. And now we need this voice out there. So the lines between personal brands, company brands, employer brands really are blurring. And your people, they are your brand. They're the people who are out there. They're at the events selling your products on the exhibition stand. They're calling people up. They're hiring potential talent. So they are your brand. So the lines are so blurred that they can have their personal brand that's really about them, and it helps keep them true to themselves, but they are pushing your own brand as well. So it's all plugged in together.
Yeah, it seems like maybe this is less so in the world of B2B. I think there's less kind of protectionism around brands per se, right? So many people are doing so many different things in B2B. To your point, like, the sales rep is engaging with the customer or the prospect, and maybe there's probably other people involved, sales engineer and marketing. So there's kind of all these different players and voices, but I think we are, to your point, it's kind of blurring, but we're still in this kind of interesting moment where we see, like, now we're seeing the executives, right, as you said, out on in many companies, out on social, creating content themselves. But at the same time, there are marketers who I think really kind of view it as, at least some of them do, as their responsibility to kind of control brand message, keep everything very consistent. And that's it seems like kind of an impossible task when it comes to social media, just it being so
Absolutely.
kind of organic. I mean, would you agree with that? Do you have any thoughts on that?
I completely agree. I mean, I've said these words before. We can't really be the social media police. It's impossible. We've got 5,000 employees, and that would be a full-time job for an additional person in my team, I would imagine. And I suppose in the grand scheme of things, 5,000 employees isn't even that many when you see companies like Oracle or Microsoft that have way more employees. It's just impossible to be policing. And what I would say to any kind of marketing team that really wants to try and police a bit is act as a guide. You just need to provide trainings. You need to just have regular conversations with people and tell them how they should do social media, but not tell them they absolutely should do it that way. Give them freedom, because also if you want people to be extending your brand on social media, they're not going to do it if you're just going to sit there saying this is exactly how you're going to do it, and if you do it wrong, I'm going to penalize you for it as well. So I think it has a payback if you allow people that creative freedom.
Yeah, I think I would say that is just trust, right? I mean,
Yeah.
I'm sure every company has to kind of deal with maybe some folks who post things that they shouldn't. We were just talking with a client where it was an engineer who had kind of accidentally shared something that was maybe more of like kind of an internal announcement. It wasn't anything bad. It was just kind of a misunderstanding around like what that person should have shared versus not shared. But trust is such an important component to all of this, I think. And just it's like, you hired these people, trust them to do the right thing.
Absolutely. And you can't monitor their conversations they're having face to face with people. So
exactly,
like we can't, where I said earlier about trade show events, right? You're not going to have a marketing person standing on the stand listening to every single word and say, no, that was wrong, you got to change that, because you just wouldn't do that. So why do people want to do it on social media? It's basically the same thing, just a virtual world rather than physical.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. So you've been doing this a number of years. Colt as an organization has changed and grown over that period. Where does advocacy rank amongst investments and priorities in marketing, and maybe just talk for a minute about the team that you're on and kind of who you report up to and kind of how all this fits?
Yeah, definitely. So I sit within a marketing communications team. So we use Everyone Social to really extend a lot of our marketing messages, but then also to extend other messages that are important to the brand as well. And because we have that communications element, it means it's not just the sole marketing stuff, because we need to communicate what is our strategy and where is the company kind of going. And I would say it's becoming quite a big priority within the company, because we are really seeing the impact of having tons of people sharing our messages on social media. We do regular brand surveys to measure our brand health, and we're not just looking at customers, we're looking just at IT decision makers, and they're all saying we like to get our information from social media and we're ready to have a conversation via social media. And so we're seeing that the stuff that we are doing is having a direct impact on our decision makers. So it's working for our audience, and therefore it makes it much easier for me to convince people at Colt to give me money for these tools, because we've got the tangible answers.
Yeah, yeah. How do you think, like, just from a audience, buyer standpoint, we talked about Colt executives and how their use of social has changed over the last 4 or 5 years. The program and the results, but the broader world, like I don't know that 4 or 5 plus years ago, the majority, or that there were a ton of people perhaps on LinkedIn that were IT background, buyer, but like, how do you think the overall landscape has changed? Like you said, this is where they're going to do their research. Like,
Yeah.
What's your and the marketing team's kind of view of like how the world is shifting and how important social is, just from a general marketing perspective?
I think it comes down to like who the customer is today to who they were probably a few years ago. I think there are tons of stats out there that millennials form most of the workforce at this point, and millennials are the first generation that really were using the internet and kind of adopted it straight away and have really built it into their lives. And so we're seeing customers be millennials, so they're just more likely to be using social media. But I also think the way people are using channels like LinkedIn has just changed so much. And I think if you spoke to someone like 5 years ago and they said, I don't have a LinkedIn profile, you might go, all right, it's a bit strange, but okay. And now it's like, you
Exactly.
don't have a LinkedIn profile? What do you mean you don't have one? Like, my last 3 jobs I got from being on LinkedIn, like, why wouldn't I be using it? So I think, it's like the way people are using it is so different. And I'm getting much fewer messages these days that are just about recruitment. So I would say 5 years ago, it was so much about recruitment. And now it is so much more focused on having conversations and seeing if there's opportunities to work together and ultimately make money. But it's all about, that conversations. And I think everyone is seeing that. And so it's becoming really important to many businesses.
Yeah, I think that's an important distinction. Like, an actual network has kind of arisen, as opposed to just kind of selling recruiting data to other people to then send you in. I mean, we all still get a ton of probably unwanted in-mails, but are you still involved with the sales team at Colt and supporting them? How have you seen their mindset shift, if at all? Like, how are they thinking about social now versus even at the individual rep level?
I'm finding they see more and more importance in using social media. One thing I love about salespeople is they're super competitive, and they see people using social media, and they see, the statistics are all out there. The people who use social media in their sales cycles tend to close more deals. And so I don't think that's unique to any organization. I think it's just quite general for everyone. So if you see people doing that, they're using social media, they're closing more deals, then you're going to feel more competitive and do it yourself. So I find salespeople are more happy to use social media than ever before now, and all over the globe as well. When I started at Colt, there was lots of like the different countries all had different kind of opinions on how they use social media. And I'm starting to see that pretty much every country that Colt operates in, they're willing to use social media in some way, because we all see that it's really beneficial. And I always speak to salespeople. I try to speak to them in their language, which most of the time is money. So I tell them about how if you do this, you're going to make more money. And they just seem to be like, okay, let's do this thing then. And it seems to be paying off. So yeah.
Cool. What kind of looking at things from a little bit of a different angle, like, what are you and the Colt marketing team's biggest challenges this year? Obviously, a lot's changed, in the world, is just with finance and everything. Everyone seems to be in kind of a very different position than they were a year ago. What do you see as the biggest challenges?
That's a really good question. For me, so the biggest challenges probably in social media are the fact there's tons of new social channels all the time. And I get a lot of pressure from many people around the company saying, we should be on this new social network. So I think within my team, it's probably this trying to stay on the front foot rather than being on the back foot of chasing all these social media channels. And I'd say probably within wider marketing, I think we all can see what's going on in the wider world of lots of companies where they probably invested lots in during COVID, and now they don't know what to do because they've invested money during COVID. They probably not got the payback from it from their companies. So obviously we have to try a lot harder to convince people to give us their information to become a lead, because our customers are thinking a lot more about how they're spending their budget. So we have to make sure that every campaign we do is not just a generic white paper. It's something that is so relevant to right now. For example, like we've got campaigns coming up about how you use AI and stuff like that, because ChatGPT has just become so big. And so we have to really think about how we're interesting people, just because we want them to end up ultimately spending money on Colt. So we have to make sure we're always at the front when it comes to our campaigns.
Yeah, absolutely. Not just about how you're spending money internally to run your marketing, but what you're spending money on in terms of buying stuff too. Just as you're saying, it's the mindset across the board. What are your goals for the employee advocacy program this year?
The employee advocacy program, we measure the amount of shares that we get each month. I'm not sure if that's what every company does, but that's the way I like to look at it. And so we like to get at least 2 shares per user in our platform, because we think that is quite successful. And we also like to look at how people are engaging with that content as well. For me, in social media in general, it's not just employee advocacy, I'm huge on engagement. I don't see the point in having big audiences on social media if they're not engaging with you. So we really try to measure that engagement part of it as well, and teach people to create engaging content, which is probably one of the other goals, is building people's confidence to create their own content or to tweak what we've written so it just sounds a bit more like them. Yeah.
Absolutely. What like looking forward, to the end of the year, maybe even beyond, what do you think is going to separate marketing teams that are successful in this environment versus those that aren't?
I think it's always going to be trying to be with the trends, not behind them. That's what's going to really separate the good from the bad. I think in the world that we live in, it's very hard to keep up with all the trends that are going on right now. But if you have a group of people that evaluate a trend and whether it's suitable for your business, then you should be absolutely jumping on it. An example for me being TikTok. Someone told me we need to be on TikTok. At first I was like, I don't think so, because my initial research was all about like, all the content was like 16-year-olds doing lip syncs to Jason Derulo songs. But as time went on, I kept evaluating it and saw it was a really great place for a B2B company to be if you did it right. And so that's what's going to separate the good from the bad, making sure that we are always with the trend and analyzing whether it's good enough for us. And sometimes those trends are not going to be right for you. You might jump on them and they're not going to work. That's also fine. And I think that's what really separates like the good from the bad. You always need to be testing. Sometimes things don't work. That's absolutely fine as well.
Yeah. One other question I want to ask you, you touched on, so you're on the team that includes marketing and comms. And I think, this is a question we have, and I think, not all of our clients are, of course, the teams are structured the same. Different people kind of own the advocacy program. What have you seen? What's important about working with both marketing and comms? Like, how is that benefited, or like maybe what struggles has it presented?
I think when programs seem to sit in like just one area of the business, it's quite hard for that program to then focus on other areas of the business. So sitting with marketing and comms means that we get to focus on more than one part of the business. I find when social media teams or advocacy teams sit solely in marketing, you see on LinkedIn the same campaign post has been posted 300 times, no editing. And it's just like, let's try and get these leads. But when they sit across different teams, you'll be able to have multiple goals. Like I was saying earlier about comms, being able to communicate the strategy of the business. That is an important thing as well. It's not just the lead generating content, it's the kind of content your audience is interested in, and your audience will want to know where your company is going, or they want to know what companies are doing for sustainability and all that kind of stuff that maybe doesn't normally sit in a marketing activity. So I think that's the real benefit. It's like you get to kind of sit. You are sitting in a function, but you are thinking about other areas of the business and ultimately being successful.
Yeah, that makes, marketing is I think that's kind of the sweet spot, because marketing's remit, of course, is to be pushing these messages on an external basis. But comms, and to a degree other groups within the company, but especially comms, they're more tapped into the individuals. It's like if we think about like marketing, usually the marketing team is kind of sitting behind a curtain, right? You don't necessarily, it's not like the individual team members reaching out and generating content themselves, right? They're doing it under the umbrella of the brand. And so I appreciate your thoughts on that.
Yeah, and I think when we think about ourselves as users of social media, for me personally, if I follow a company and all they do is try to like give me the marketing material, I'm going to unfollow. And it'd be the same if I speak to an individual. If a salesperson connects with me on LinkedIn, for example, if the first thing they do is send me an email trying to sell me something, you're done. You're back out of the connection base, because that you're just giving me like a marketing message. But if a salesperson connects with me and they're showing lots of content that's about their company, about the industry, and they're showing that they are a thought leader, and then they send me the email asking for my money, you're more likely to get a conversation, because I'm trusting. And I know you're not, I mean, obviously, ultimately they want to hit their sales target, but I know they're trying to do it in a more authentic way, and probably a more unique approach as well.
Yeah, and I think going back to your earlier point, like now it's, everyone's got to work harder. We have to work harder. We have to be smarter with everything that we're doing, the things that we're buying, the things that we're investing in. And it's kind of shocking to get connected with some people are translating that, it seems, to being more direct, more aggressive on social right out of the gate. On LinkedIn, I not only get these messages, immediately upon connecting with someone, or in many cases, if I haven't connected with them, they're just sending me using their credits. But then it's almost, in some cases, they use it like email, where they just keep going, and I get multiple, even if I've never interacted with them or anything. And it's I don't have to tell you this, but like, that's the beauty of social, right? There's so many ways to start to get onto someone's radar and build trust, from engaging with the stuff that they're sharing to commenting, liking, tagging them on something that you like. You don't have to, cold clock them in a in-mail. It's I don't even know what these people are selling. Like, I don't even want to read it, to your point, like, they're gone.
But that's the thing, right? You said the word social, right? I think people forget this. In social media, there's a massive word, social. And if we think about ourselves as people, as social beings, if you walked into a pub and there was someone there that maybe would buy something off you, you wouldn't walk straight up to them and say, hey, do you want to buy this phone? You might go like, hi, my name's Jake, nice to meet you. And, oh, I like this thing that you're talking about, or that's my favorite beer too. You have a conversation, and then ultimately maybe they will buy your phone. But you don't just walk up to someone and say, hi, give me money. You have to do a process. It's a social process. And I think people on LinkedIn have completely forgotten that it is still social. You need to be social in some way. You can't just hound me with a message and expecting me to be interested in any way.
Yeah, and I think the other thing is, like, obviously every business is different, product, market, all these things factor in. But like, one of the things we hear a lot of I think is driving like current interest in social and in employee advocacy in particular is, and I think this has largely been the case like over the years that we've been operating as a business. One of our clients, Adobe, did a pretty in-depth study a number of years ago. They were trying to understand, like, how do we attribute the shares on social, be they brand or be they employee? And they came to a conclusion at the time that was, they matter, but it's like an assist, right? It's not, it's a rare event that you would simply share something that you would reach out to someone that immediately results in a deal, right? I mean, when does that ever occur in B2B? It's like 100 different touch points. But the word I've heard a lot of CMOs that I've talked with in the last few months use in their teams is awareness is really like key right now. Because to your point, over the last few years, everyone went so far over, the cliff on demand gen and buying data and targeting and ads and all these things. And I think even if it's some of our clients who are more deeply kind of focused on sales, even though their salespeople are on everyone's social and they're, training and enabling them like to really effectively use social, in the overall strategy is really that it is more almost like marketing. They're an extension of the marketing team, right? It's not simply, hey, go out and social and like sell everyone. It's like, this is where people are. We want them to be aware. If they're aware, they know about us, and then hopefully we can cultivate more of a relationship from there. But anyways.
Absolutely. I mean, in B2B, I think awareness is so important because you're not as likely to see them on a TV advert or other places. Like, you're not going to see someone wearing, I mean, I've got a branded hoodie on right now, but like a Colt branded hoodie, but it's not very often you're going to have people out wearing your brand and something. So you really do need that awareness element. It's so important. And as soon as everyone wakes up and realize that, the better.
Well, thanks for taking time, Jake. It was really fun to chat. I really appreciate your thoughts on all this.
No worries. I'm happy to be here. Thank you for having me.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Social at Scale podcast. If you enjoyed what you heard, please be sure to subscribe. If you didn't enjoy it, please let me know. You can access past episodes on our site at everyonesocial.com/podcast. As always, please feel free to connect with me directly on Twitter or LinkedIn, and look forward to seeing you next time.